Hello and welcome to another episode of Lupus LA's Your Story, Our Fight podcast. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, and right off the top, I want to thank our amazing sponsors at Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals and the fantastic team at Gemini Beauty. Today, all the way from New Jersey, I want to introduce this audience to Lauren Fenty. Lauren was in the medical field prior to her lupus diagnosis, and the past 9 years has been full of sort of, I would say, ups and downs, right, Lauren?
Yes. Yep.
Well, welcome to the podcast.
Thank
I'm
you.
really happy to have you. You're a really special person, and I'm excited for our audience to hear your story. So why don't we start?
Great.
Sort of tell me who Lauren was before lupus.
Okay, so Lauren was the vibrant, want to shop and be in the mall from the time it opens to the time it closes on the weekends, just constantly moving. And I would say a little bit more outgoing than before, and always wanted to be with my friends and just active, completely like active. I'm ready to do whatever. Um, so that's how it was before my
And then
diagnosis, and
what
that
did you
was
first
back
start
in
noticing?
everything, this whole journey began back in 2013, and I noticed weird like physical symptoms like joint pain, uh back pain, muscle pain, not being able to like wash dishes, like really simple things were really difficult to do. So with that being said, now after that diagnosis, things began to slow down. So I wasn't really going shopping as much as I was before. I wasn't taking public transportation as much as I was before, right? Because then if you have to deal with delays, now you're standing up on your feet and you could cause yourself some pain. But that's it definitely made a big difference, you know.
How
So
quickly were you diagnosed? Like how? So when you started in 2013, feeling your symptoms, what were your next steps?
it was a lot of blood work, a lot of like maybe I think at that one point I was doing an X-ray just so that they can take a look at everything. And then within 2 weeks, they knew they just told me what was going on, and I'm kind of like, well, what do you mean? Because well, when the doctor called, he said, "Does anybody in your family have this?" And I said, "No." Like he's like, nobody? And I'm like, no, like what is it? Like what, what's going on? Initially they thought it was like Lyme disease, but I'm like
Hmm.
Lyme disease, and I was thinking that's like when you're, I guess, like out in the woods or something like that or
More,
whatever.
yeah,
But
yeah.
very similar symptoms, but not quite that.
Hmm.
So I had to educate myself on what it is, what it means to have a autoimmune disease, and how to just go about life, make some changes. And I realized that I didn't have to stop everything, but a lot of things needed to slow down. A lot
Hmm.
of things needed to slow down. Like a basic bike ride wouldn't be how it was prior to the diagnosis. Like you now you have to take it easy. Now you might need, to wrap your knee and things like that. So it's been a pretty long journey, learning experience. It's a part of my story. It's a part of who I am now. And it's kind of like just like how you have to get up and shower every morning. You have to get up and, know your routine, know how to, go about your day, kind of plan it, and then just go from there. It's very unpredictable though.
I mean, I think you're going to be our record time in terms of how fast you got diagnosed compared to every other guest on the podcast I've had.
Oh
So
yeah,
2 weeks is
within.
certainly record time because most people go a long time with sort of various symptoms before getting diagnosed. So
Yeah.
I think you're really fortunate in that. What kind of treatment did you start right away?
Oh, they started me on steroids. So I did
Hmm.
prednisone and methotrexate. Um, they were able to, at the time they were able to give me like Advil and Motrin and those sorts of things. I can't take those now. We could get into that a little bit later, but those were the main things. And it was a lot of blood work and, different blood tests. And then it just seems like over time, those medications that I just named weren't really doing much for me. And I
Hmm.
spent about maybe 8 weeks or so, on those. And once we didn't get a result, because of course they would monitor my labs, we tried something else. So we've tried like Imuran,
Hmm.
Cellcept, Benlysta, Rituxan, other types of
All of that.
steroids,
Yeah.
like the list goes on and on and on. And then of course when I was interested in trying out some stuff with NYU. Like I have
Hmm.
my nephrologist is at NYU, and there was a few clinical trials that I was interested in. But you of course you would have to be diagnosed with lupus, but you can't have any prior experience using like prednisone, or you would have to have been off it for a few years before they can even consider you for the trial. So that was a little bit rocky, but it's something that you I just worked through.
Yeah. No, I mean, and yeah,
Yeah.
the drug trials are always tricky. I mean, they really they want to put as many lupus patients in the trial, but their protocols are always really tough. But I admire you for really going after it and trying to dig, and try to
Thank
find the
you.
right combination of medicines. I
Yeah.
think you've
Yep.
certainly been on the gamut of what's out there, and I think
Yeah.
um, who diagnosed? Was it a rheumatologist that diagnosed you originally, or a primary care
It
doctor?
was a primary care doctor, because at the time with the pain, it wasn't like I made an appointment to see the doctor. I went into like a urgent care facility in
Hmm.
like excruciating pain. Um, it was difficult to walk. It was difficult to sit. Standing for too long was painful. So they kind of like just wondered like what could this be? And so they're, oh, okay, we'll like I mentioned before, we'll do a couple tests and figure it out. I'm like, okay. So then that's when they were finding like just like I believe it's called the SED rate and the
Yep.
ANA levels, and
Yep.
like, yeah, and then it was just high, and I'm like, well, I don't even know how I got this, you know.
Right.
And I was more concerned about not actually having it, but why isn't there something that we can do about it, instead of just
Hmm.
kind of like maintaining it, because it doesn't. One thing that I noticed is that a lot of people don't have access to medication, or certain doctors, or it's kind
Yeah.
of difficult to
I
deal
will
with.
tell you though. I mean, what I'm super impressed by is, um, I think so many people go out to so many different doctors. So I really commend the urgent care doctors, because that's a very rare thing
Yeah.
for an urgent
Yeah.
care doctor to take it seriously enough to run the right blood tests and to, so it shows you really how, it doesn't matter where your doctor is, as long as they're
Yeah.
inquisitive and curious and trusting in your symptoms. That to me is my message for all the doctors out there. I don't know how many listen to
Yeah.
us,
I
but
agree.
it's really about listening to your patient, because
Yeah.
I know in those urgent care facilities things move really quickly, and
Yeah.
for them to really take the time, they should be really commended. And I think it's really lucky. I think so many people, it takes referrals to find a right
Yeah.
rheumatologist, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's an inspiration to people out there who think that it can't be done in the current system we have. And I think that should be encouraging. I think it should be encouraging to other doctors too to hear your story.
I think that would be excellent. I
Yeah.
think that
Um,
would be good.
so so you mentioned a nephrologist. So then at some point beyond the joint pain, you went into kidney involvement and organ involvement.
Yes. Yep. In 2017. So the diagnosis originally was the for systemic lupus in 2013. 2017. That's when um, this is interesting, because my gynecologist, after doing an annual, found that it was like my protein levels were a little high. She's like, I think you might want to see, I'm going to give you a referral to see a nephrologist. And so I just took it from there. And so she kind of um, found out, or she kind of led me to the point of, finding a nephrologist. And so it's like, with the diagnosis, you wouldn't think a primary care doctor would would actually, give you that information. And then with the gynecologist, like, oh, here, you need to see a nephrologist. It's like, what? So It was an interesting path
Yeah,
so far,
but
to
it's
say
a
the
it's a it's
least.
a great path. I think it talks
Yeah,
to about how holistic the system really should be. This is
I
how the
agree.
system should work. The gynecologist got to look at the whole person, and you know the primary care doctor obviously needs to look at the whole person. I think that's really inspirational to me that it's out there and that you benefited from that. Um, so at the time of your diagnosis or time of your initial symptoms, um, where were you working? What were you doing then?
I was a clinical analyst at a hospital in Montclair, New Jersey. Um, and I just regular day-to-day stuff. I went to a few meetings that day, and I came back to my desk, and it was like just like something hit me. It came out of
Mm-hmm.
nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's
Hmm.
when I was my mom lives much further away at the time than I was, and I needed her to drive from where she was to come to my job to take me to an urgent care center that was back by where she was. And it
Ugh.
was just like I just couldn't believe how much pain I was in. I'm like, usually I've always been the type to power through stuff. Take a Tylenol or don't take a Tylenol,
Mm-hmm.
and just keep going. I couldn't do it that day.
Hmm.
I
Did you
couldn't
now?
do it
Did you
that day.
have symptoms like, and you look back beyond that day? Do you look back and go, huh? I always did have this achy knee or this sort of like. Do you piece it together in
I
retrospect?
tr- I try to, definitely looking back. Growing up, like as a kid, I always had pain, but it was always in the left leg, but always in one spot.
Hmm.
It wasn't in both. And I'm like, could this like possibly be the start of what was going on? I was constantly in pain as a kid, and my mom would have to, like, I would cry in the middle of the night, and she would hear me come in, and she's like trying to massage my legs with like alcohol and stuff. But after the diagnosis, those pains came right back. The
Hmm.
same, like, and I'm just like, this reminds me of when I was like an 8-year old. So those pains came back. Sometimes I will notice them as like a side effect. It would feel very similar to if I take like the Rituxan infusion therapy that I was doing, I might feel a little bit of it. But it can be to the point where like I'm up in the middle of the night and nothing works, but I'm just like taking deep breaths through it. Or you try to find like a calming, soothing music. I downloaded the Calm app for when I have
Yeah.
those, those moments. But yeah, looking back, I think that it may have been a start of, like, maybe that's like the start of it, or like I
Yeah.
don't know. It's very hard
It
to
was
tell. It's very
bubbling
hard to
under the
tell.
surface there. Yeah, bubbling under the
Yeah,
surface
yeah.
there,
I'm
and
like, I wonder if this
yeah.
is where it started. Yeah.
All
But
right, we're
then
gonna
for
take
no
a
one in
quick
my
break.
family to
Oh, go
have it.
ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, nobody
Oh,
in
but
your
then for
family.
no one in the family to have it, that was just a little bit of a hard thing to deal
And
with.
and before we take our break, so after your diagnosis, did anyone else subsequently in your family say, "Oh, you know what? I've always been feeling this way or that way," or still nobody, no other lupus in your family?
My sisters were tested, and everyone was negative.
That's great. That's great. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about sort of how your diagnosis has really changed your life, your career, and how you became a lupus activist. So stand by. We'll be right back with more from Lauren Fenty.
Lupus LA's fellowship program is an essential part of ensuring the training of future rheumatologists. The nation is experiencing a serious shortage of pediatric rheumatologists. Today, there are approximately 300,000 children diagnosed with rheumatic conditions in the United States, but only about 250 practicing pediatric rheumatologists to meet this tremendous need. Call 310-657-5667 or visit our website at lupusla.org to support the efforts of Lupus LA.
We are back on the Your Story, Our Fight podcast with our guest today, Lauren Fenty. So, Lauren, you mentioned you were a clinical analyst in a hospital. Tell me what that does. What do you do? What does that mean?
So a lot of that included, it was like you're working with the nurses, but you're also a part of IT. So that division was kind of like clinical informatics. And when the nurses had issues with the system, we would go in and help them with like assessment planning and discharge medications for the patients. And if we had any type of IT issue and we needed downtime, we would assist the nurses with anything that needed to be put on paper. So we did a lot of paper orders or verbal orders. That was pretty much what that was. On top of that, I also went around just getting like a patient, just a feel for how, what the patients thought about the experience with pretty much the nursing care. That was something that we stayed on top of as well. So it was like patient satisfaction as well as that.
So you were really
So that's
familiar
what I
with
was doing.
you were really familiar with the medical field and
Yep.
hospitals, and so do you think that helped when you were diagnosed? Do you had that support system and that network?
It helped tremendously because you hear some of the medicines that they were prescribing for me. I'm like, oh, I heard that on the third floor. Oh, I heard that, in med surg. And I'm like, some of these things are familiar to me. So it wasn't as scary to me. It was more like, oh, it's like discovery. Let's find out like what this really is, what it can do. And that was a way of me pushing through, like just getting, trying to really get through what this, this whole experience, this whole diagnosis was a lot.
So you really
But
dove in from the clinical side, from the research. You're a researcher. You're
yeah,
and
yeah.
and do you think that because sometimes people who do so much digging and research, it's you can panic, but I think for you, you had to feed that to feel comfortable. You had to feed that beast.
Yeah. It's kind of like I think of it when like my dad taught us how to ride a bike, and once you take the training wheels off, you might fall. It's kind of like that. Like you just have to kind of just go for it. And if you do, you scrape yourself, you get back up, and you have to keep going.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you'll never discover what it's like to ride a bike, or you won't learn about lupus. You won't learn about anything.
As a dad who has taught one kid and is teaching the second kid how to ride a bike, I completely relate to that. Absolutely. So tell me, when you were diagnosed, then did it change your career path? Did it change your trajectory?
No, I actually got to a point where I wanted to go into nursing school. But then once I realized this is what you have to do, it may be a little bit too much. And it was, I kind of pulled back a little bit and just kind of went into research. And then research went from um, learning about the medications to now let's dive into autoimmune disease as a whole. Like, what is it?
Hmm.
Um, what types are out there? What type of medications are people on? And I kind of just went from there, where it just became like research. That's how I ended up with, going into the curiosity of clinical trials and reading about medications that are over in like Germany, but not in the US yet, and what they're
Hmm.
doing just in other countries.
And what about your career? Did you stop working or did you continue working?
I kept going.
Yeah.
I
So
kept
are you still
going.
doing the same thing?
No, I stopped recently. But that's because I had to start a new treatment, and that was going on longer than like what it was before. So I might have done, say, for example, Benlysta once a month.
Hmm.
Now with the infusions, they're once a week. So then I have to deal with side effects and things like that. So I took time off, um, and I think that was one of the best decisions I made, to focus
Hmm.
on what I have going on right now,
Hmm.
because
Yep.
it wasn't always, it was, yeah, like I'm fighting, but I feel like I'm fighting because I'm still pushing and going to work. But that could also be looked in the other way. Like now you're pushing and going to work, but you're not taking care of what you need to take care of. And it
Right.
was
Right.
always that I had to feel like you can do this, like you can power through it. And then I had to realize that that's not always the case. Like you
Hmm.
have to slow down
Yep.
sometimes. You have to listen to your body. Like it's okay to sleep all day sometimes.
Right, right,
So
right. Yep,
yeah.
yep.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I think that should be our slogan for the show. It's okay to sleep all day sometimes, and then other times it's okay to push through and go. And I think
Yeah.
both things are true with a lupus patient,
Hmm.
and it really is. It can change from one day to the next day to the next day.
Yeah.
So I know when we talked before, I know when you first were diagnosed, there was a lot of fear about your diagnosis. And you talked to me about going to a support group. And so tell me about your journey about now wanting to share your story and how that evolved.
It was just over time thinking about how quick my diagnosis was, right? And then hearing other stories. Once I joined the support group, I was hearing stories about, oh, the doctors don't know what's wrong. They think it's arthritis. They think it's MS. They think it's, ALS or something, and they're not getting the individualized care that they need. At one point, I just started to feel like you can be a voice. You can be like a vessel for these people. So reach out, and that's what I started to do. And now I help a few. It's not a whole lot, but I do talk to a few, both women and men, because right, we both get it, and we just share a lot of information back and forth. We talk about different states, because they're all over the U.S., different states, and who can get access to what. And I try to help them, like, hey, it might not be your nephrologist that can tell you, or go
Right.
start with your primary care doctor. Don't just get a referral, and then it's so many different things. But the journey seemed like it was almost overnight when it come to just the support and reaching out. It seems like it was just something that it had to happen, because a lot of people don't know about it. Even when I share some of it, sometimes people are like, what's that? And then,
Right.
so now I'm explaining like what it is. And before getting into that type of support or having those type of support groups, I was attending the walks that they have here in MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. And those were really
Yep.
fun. Once the pandemic started, of course, we had to, everybody tried to scale back on that. And then I had joined another chapter in New Jersey, and we were trying to do like the virtual walks and try to see how we can do fundraisers, but it was so difficult because a lot of outreach, I guess, to me, from my perspective, was being able to be around other people. It's a different feel, so that kind of died down a little bit, and now things are just, picking back up again. So I'm still looking to see what events I can attend. And as long as I'm feeling good enough to go, if I'm not, of course, they might, stream it somewhere and I'll be able to watch it. So that's
Yeah, I
pretty
think the
much how that
whole
whole thing started.
Yeah, I mean, the whole patient care and patient support group business has changed for us on the Lupus LA side. Everything had to go virtual, and we're finding that I think some patients really like that. It's much easier for them. They don't have to drive. They don't have to, deal with LA traffic
Yeah.
and all of that. But
Yeah.
and we're reaching people all over the world. I mean, and that's, I think, a benefit. But I do think there are people that really need that in-person physical contact kind of support. And I hope, that we'll be able to get back to that. And I think you're absolutely right. It's, both can be important. And I think we've learned a lot within the community about how we can support people virtually. But I think now, as the numbers hopefully start to get better, or lupus patients are able to kind of come out a little bit more, that we're able to get back to some level of in person. And I don't know,
Yeah.
I'm hoping that some of what we've learned will translate in person. I think people being separated by regions has been really hard, and maybe there are ways for people to travel and meet the people they've been speaking with virtually and things like that. So I think your story is an important part of that. I think your sharing and your leadership amongst other lupus patients is really important. And I thank you for doing that. I thank you for telling your story here on the podcast.
Thank you for listening.
On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz. wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.